In a world obsessed with instant gratification and polished perfection, the most unforgettable people are often the ones who don't try to be. They aren't the loudest in the room. They don't beg to be noticed. They simply carry something most people have never learned how to develop: a deep sense of self-respect, a quiet kind of strength, and the discipline to walk away when they are no longer valued. That kind of presence doesn't just fade, it echoes, it lingers in silence, and most of all, it's the kind that people regret letting go. What if the key to being unforgettable isn't about doing more, or being more but needing less? What if it's not about performing, chasing, or proving anything, but about becoming someone so grounded in who they are that your absence says more than your presence ever needed to? In a world that confuses loud with powerful, being calm, composed, and unavailable to nonsense is a revolutionary act. That's where your power begins, not in the effort to keep someone, but in the courage to walk away when you're not seen fully. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The Stoics lived this truth. Marcus Aurelius never adjusted his values to gain approval. He wrote to remind himself how to stay aligned with them. Epictetus didn't chase attention or validation. He practiced restraint and reminded others that true power lies in what you can control: yourself. They didn't obsess over being loved or accepted. They focused on living with honor, clarity, and discipline, and in doing so they became the kind of men whose words are still quoted 2,000 years later. So if you've ever been the one who gave too much, loved too deeply, or stayed too long, this video is for you. Not to teach you how to make anyone suffer for losing you, but to show you how to become someone who no longer waits to be chosen. Because when you stop begging to be kept, you become the one they'll quietly regret letting go. You don't get there by performing. You get there by transforming. Today, we're going to break down 5 powerful ways to build that kind of energy, not by pretending to be perfect, but by returning to what Stoic philosophy always taught: character over charm, discipline over desire, and peace over approval. And if you feel something stirring in you, if this isn't just information, but something deeper, then take 1 second and hit that subscribe button. Not because I asked, but because you're ready to raise the standard. Let's begin. Principle 1. You become unforgettable when you stop needing to be chosen. There's a quiet kind of desperation many people carry, and they don't even know it. It shows up in how we speak, how we dress, how we text, how we wait, always hoping, silently wondering if this time someone will choose us. It starts young. We're taught to raise our hands and wait for permission, to behave, to be polite, to smile at the right time. We're told to be agreeable, be flexible, be nice. Not because we're bad, but because we're scared. Scared that being fully ourselves might be too loud, too intense, too inconvenient. So, we perform. We soften. We adjust. And over time, we forget that there's a version of us underneath all that. A version that doesn't need to be chosen because it already belongs to itself. And here's the thing. The more you try to be picked, the more you hand your power away. It's like saying, "Please see my worth," before I believe in it myself. And that's not love. That's not connection. That's survival. That's asking someone else to do the work that you haven't done within. And even if they choose you, it never feels solid. Because deep down, you know you were chosen for a version of you that was never real. And nothing real can ever come from that kind of performance. But there comes a moment and it doesn't have to be loud, when everything changes. You stop begging, you stop over-explaining, you stop shrinking. It's not that you become heartless, it's that you become whole. You realize that you don't need to be liked by everyone to be valuable. You don't need a spotlight to matter. You don't need to fight for space in places that don't feel like home. That realization, that's the birth of your power. And once you feel that, you can't unfeel it. The Stoics understood this in a way most of us never learned. Epictetus didn't waste his time trying to be admired. He taught that the greatest power is self-mastery, the ability to rule your own mind, not the minds of others. Know first who you are, he said, and then adorn yourself accordingly. Which means find your truth and stop decorating yourself with illusions. Stop waiting to be accepted into a room that doesn't honor your presence. Build your own foundation, one rooted in principle, not popularity. Because when you no longer need to be chosen, your entire energy changes. You don't rush to respond. You don't chase closure. You don't bend into smaller shapes just to be held. You hold yourself. And from that space, you see clearly. You see who respects you and who only respects your boundaries when it benefits them. You see who values you and who only valued your silence, your compliance, your usefulness. You see everything, and with that clarity comes freedom. Most people aren't afraid of losing someone who needs them. They're afraid of losing someone who doesn't, because neediness can be manipulated. It gives them leverage. But someone who knows their worth, someone who doesn't flinch when love walks away, that's threatening, that's rare, that's magnetic, and that's exactly why they'll regret letting you go. Not because you begged them to stay, but because you didn't. When you need to be chosen, you settle. You put up with mixed signals, low effort, emotional scraps, all because you're scared that walking away means walking into loneliness. But the truth is, walking away doesn't create loneliness. It reveals it. And once you see what you've been filling with other people's approval, you finally get the chance to fill it with something real, something permanent, something they can never take away. And here's where Stoicism gives you the sharpest edge. It teaches you to detach not from people, but from the illusion that you need them to be whole. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That includes your relationships. That includes the stories you tell yourself about why someone's validation matters more than your own. Because once you stop giving others the pen, you get to write your own ending. And that's when your story becomes worth remembering. They'll regret letting you go. Not because you punished them or posted about it or tried to make them jealous. They'll regret it in silence, in their quiet moments. When they realize that what you gave, the depth, the honesty, the presence, wasn't ordinary, it wasn't common, it was rare. And they'll scroll through highlight reels and hollow conversations and still not find what you brought to the table without ever asking them to match it. But none of that should be your motivation. The real motivation is this: becoming someone who no longer needs to be chosen because they've already chosen themselves. You don't get there through revenge. You don't get there by pretending you don't care. You get there by doing the inner work, by facing the loneliness, by becoming the kind of person who can sit with silence and know they are still enough. So if you're tired of trying to prove your worth, stop. Let people wonder why you disappeared. Let them feel the gap your absence creates. Let them sit with the reality that the person they took for granted became the person they could never replace. Because the truth is simple. The more you try to be picked, the more you forget your own power. And the moment you stop chasing is the moment they start remembering. Principle 2. Evolve instead of performing. Most people say they want growth, yet spend their days polishing an image instead of deepening their character. Scrolling, posting, checking who noticed, they believe progress is measured by hearts on a screen. Real growth is quieter. It happens the moment you let go of the version of yourself that was built to survive and choose the version that is ready to live. The applause from outside can feel good for a moment, yet it never reaches the places inside you that still feel unseen. That emptiness keeps you hustling for the next compliment, the next confirmation that you matter. But approval is never a sustainable fuel. It burns fast and leaves you exhausted. True evolution begins the day you decide your identity cannot be rented out to every opinion in the room. Think back to the first time you realized pretending was easier than honesty. Maybe it was childhood, when fitting in felt safer than standing out. Maybe it was a relationship where you laughed at jokes that cut you because arguing felt riskier than silence. Over years, these small edits become armor. They protect, but they also imprison. The philosopher Socrates warned that an unexamined life is not worth living. If you never pause to ask why you shrink, you will spend the rest of your life inside armor that no longer fits. Growth demands you open that metal cage, even if fresh air stings at first. Comfort zones are rarely comfortable once you realize they are cages with velvet walls. The Stoics treated growth as a moral duty, not a trendy project. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily reminders to himself, not to impress anyone, but to sharpen his own integrity. He saw every sunrise as another chance to practice courage, moderation, and justice. Epictetus, born into slavery, insisted that freedom begins the day you rule your own mind. They measured progress by character, not by trophies. In modern language, that means stop announcing your glow-up and start embodying it. When discipline guides your mornings, gratitude guides your evenings, and principle guides every decision between, people feel the change long before you speak of it. Here's a practical exercise the Stoics would recognize. Tonight, list 3 patterns that keep you small. Maybe you apologize for truths that need no apology. Maybe you agree to plans that drain you. Maybe you numb discomfort with endless scrolling. Write them plainly, without drama. Then write the opposite behavior beside each one. Tomorrow, practice the opposite, even in a tiny way. Replace apology with honest silence. Replace mindless yes with a clear no. Replace scrolling with a 10-minute walk. Small, consistent actions reshape identity more effectively than any overnight reinvention. Aristotle reminded us that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is therefore a habit. Your habits are the chisels that sculpt the person you become. Do not be surprised when your evolution unsettles people who preferred the old you. Some friends love your wounds because they get to play savior. Some partners love your silence because it guarantees their comfort. The moment you choose growth, their roles become uncertain and they may push back. Do not negotiate your progress to keep familiar company. Plato taught that ships are safest in harbor, but that is not what ships are built for. The same applies to you. You are not built to stay anchored in waters that no longer challenge you. Sail on. Those meant to journey with you will match your wind instead of fearing your waves. Remember this: growth is not a rejection of the present self. It is an act of respect for the future self. You look at who you are with honesty, keep what serves, and release what stunts. You thank every chapter, even the painful ones, because they carried lessons that classrooms cannot teach. Then you step forward without theatrics, knowing that strength proven in silence is harder to forget than strength flaunted for show. Combine Principle 1 and Principle 2, and you become someone who neither begs to be chosen nor stays stagnant to be liked. That unmistakable combination of self-respect and forward motion is why letting you go will feel like the costliest mistake they ever made. Principle 3. Your boundaries define your value. One of the quickest ways people decide whether to respect you is by observing what you allow. Not what you say you expect, but what you quietly tolerate. People don't test you to be cruel. They test you because they are trying to figure out the rules. When you have no boundaries, you become a playground for confusion, manipulation, and emotional exhaustion. But when your standards are clear, your energy speaks before you do. And that kind of presence stays in someone's memory long after your words fade. We are taught from a young age to be likable, to be flexible, to make people comfortable. It sounds kind, it feels noble. But over time, if you're not careful, kindness turns into self-abandonment. You start saying yes when your soul means no. You stay quiet when your spirit is screaming to speak. You let people close who have done nothing to earn that kind of access. And with every act of silence, your self-respect erodes. The Stoics would not call this generosity. They would call it forgetfulness. Forgetting your own worth. Forgetting the laws by which you promised yourself to live. A person who forgets their own value becomes forgettable. But someone who protects it with intention becomes impossible to replace. The Stoics understood boundaries in the clearest way. They did not speak of them as walls to block out others. They saw them as containers for peace. Epictetus taught that freedom is not doing whatever you want, but knowing what you will not allow. He believed that real freedom begins the moment you stop giving your emotional power to what you cannot control. And you cannot control how others treat you. But you can control what you tolerate. That is where your value is defined. Not by what you demand, but by what you consistently walk away from. Every time you let someone cross your line without consequence, you redraw it in their favor. Every time you silence your needs to keep someone comfortable, you give them permission to forget you are human. And over time, you become invisible. Not because you lack worth, but because you've hidden it behind people-pleasing. You become the person who is always available, always understanding, always okay. But here is the secret. No one regrets losing the one who is always available. They regret losing the one who finally said enough. You become unforgettable when your energy is no longer free to everyone, when access to you feels earned, when your time, your presence, and your care are offered with discernment. That does not make you cold. It makes you clear, and clarity is what people remember. Not the one who bent over backward to be loved, but the one who stood tall even when it meant standing alone. There is a version of you who doesn't settle for half effort, who does not answer texts just to be polite, who does not accept apologies without change, who does not shrink to be less intimidating. That version of you exists already. But they are hidden beneath guilt, fear, and a lifetime of thinking that protecting your peace makes you selfish. That is the lie that must die for your self-respect to live. The Stoics did not believe in sacrificing virtue to gain approval. They believed in living by principle, no matter the reaction. Ask yourself this. What do you keep saying yes to that is draining you? Who in your life expects access to your attention, your energy, your kindness, without offering consistency in return? Where have you made yourself small just to avoid confrontation? These are not minor questions. These are the foundations of your freedom, because the person who regrets letting you go is not the one you begged to treat you right. It is the one who woke up one day and realized you no longer needed to ask. There is power in becoming the one who walks away with grace, not resentment, with peace, not bitterness, with clarity, not confusion. That kind of exit is remembered. That kind of boundary becomes a mirror that forces others to reflect, not because you punished them, but because you finally honored yourself. Boundaries are not just about others. They are how you train your own mind. Every time you say no to chaos, your nervous system heals. Every time you refuse to chase, your confidence rises. Every time you remove yourself instead of arguing, your peace deepens. And people feel that. They feel the difference between someone who is desperate for connection and someone who values their energy, enough to offer it only where it is respected. That difference is unforgettable. So ask yourself one final question. Are your boundaries protecting your peace or just your fear of being alone? Because when you set them from peace, not pain, something changes. Your energy sharpens, your voice steadies, and your presence becomes something people feel when you walk into the room and something they miss long after you leave. Letting you go was easy when you made yourself available to be taken for granted. But when you choose to protect your value, to guard your peace, to speak your truth with calm certainty, you become someone who is not just hard to forget. You become someone they wish they had never lost. That is what makes you unforgettable. Not how much you gave, but how powerfully you stopped when it was no longer given back. Principle 4. Emotional control is the highest form of strength. There is a kind of strength that never needs to raise its voice. It is not loud, it is not aggressive, it does not rush to defend itself. That kind of strength is emotional control. The ability to stay grounded when everything around you is pushing you to react. The ability to hold your silence when someone tries to provoke you. The ability to feel anger and not become it. In a world that rewards outrage and overreaction, emotional mastery is rare, and rare is remembered. Most people spend their lives reacting. Someone insults them, they retaliate. Someone leaves them out, they seek revenge. Someone questions their worth, and they scramble to prove it. But every time you react without thinking, you hand your power over. You say to the world, "Here, take control of my mind. Shape how I feel. Decide what I say." The Stoics saw this as the ultimate weakness. To be ruled by external events is to be a prisoner of circumstance, but to be ruled by your own reason is to be truly free. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, disease, political chaos, and death. Yet his writings never spiral into emotional drama. Instead, he asked himself each day how to meet life with composure. He wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That is not just poetic, that is practical. You do not need to react to every trigger. You can pause, you can choose, and that choice is where your strength begins. When you have emotional control, you become the calm in the storm. People may not understand it at first. They may accuse you of being distant, detached, or cold, but what they are really witnessing is discipline. Not the absence of feeling, but the refusal to let those feelings control your behavior. This does not mean you do not care. It means you care enough about your peace to protect it. And peace is not the result of avoiding conflict. It is the reward of not creating unnecessary battles. Think about the people who have left the deepest impression on you. Were they the ones who lost their temper easily, who blamed others, who panicked under pressure? Or were they the ones who stayed calm when things fell apart, who spoke with clarity in chaos, who did not need to yell to be heard? That is the kind of presence that stays with people. Not because it demanded attention, but because it carried an energy that others wanted to be near. That energy comes from self-mastery. Self-mastery is not about suppressing emotion, it is about knowing what to do with it. When anger rises, you ask what it is teaching you. When fear shows up, you examine whether it is protecting you or limiting you. When sadness takes hold, you sit with it, instead of pretending it is not there. The Stoics believed in facing emotions directly, not avoiding them, not drowning in them, but using them as teachers. Epictetus said it is not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them. When you understand that, you stop being a puppet pulled by the strings of every feeling that comes and goes. One of the most powerful habits you can build is the habit of the pause before you respond, the pause before you argue, the pause before you send that message. In that pause, you gather your mind, you breathe, you remember your values, you ask, what would my highest self do in this moment? And then you act. That one pause can save you from regret, from unnecessary conflict, from becoming someone you are not proud of. That pause can turn a moment of weakness into a moment of growth. This is not about being perfect. You will have days when your emotions win, days when you say too much or shut down completely. But progress is not measured by how many times you fall. It is measured by how quickly you return to center, how quickly you reflect, how honestly you own your part, and how intentionally you move forward. Growth is not about never breaking. It is about building the muscle that helps you reset. When you master your emotions, you stop needing to prove anything. You no longer feel the urge to explain your worth. You no longer take things personally that were never about you. You stop chasing clarity from people who cannot give it. You become anchored. And that kind of emotional stability is incredibly rare. It makes people feel safe around you. It makes your presence something they seek in times of confusion. And it makes your absence feel heavy when they no longer have access to that steady energy. The person who regrets losing you will not regret it because you cried or begged or fought for their attention. They will regret it because you responded with peace. Because you did not match their chaos, because you walked away without drama. That is what stays with them. Not your reactions, but your restraint. Not your anger, but your grace. And not your silence, but the strength behind it. So if you want to become unforgettable, stop trying to win every argument. Stop trying to be right. Stop letting your emotions be the loudest voice in the room. Start building a calm so deep that nothing shakes it. Start mastering the storms inside you so that nothing outside can touch you. And watch how your energy changes. Watch how people begin to treat you differently. Not because you asked, but because your presence now demands it without a single word. Principle 5. Fulfillment comes from wholeness, not being needed. There is a kind of love that feels like weight, not because it is deep, but because it is heavy with need. It whispers, stay with me because I am not okay without you. It asks for reassurance constantly. It turns connection into dependence. At first it feels flattering. You are needed, you are central, but slowly you begin to feel drained. Not because you love less, but because you are carrying more than what is yours. Real connection should not feel like carrying another person's sense of worth. It should feel like walking beside someone who is already standing strong. Most people confuse love with emotional rescue. They look for someone to heal their wounds, someone to fix what they never learned to face on their own. This leads to relationships that are transactional. You make me feel valuable, so I will stay. You give me meaning, so I will give you all of me. But the moment one person pulls back, the whole structure falls apart. Because it was never built on truth. It was built on need. And anything built on need becomes unstable the moment that need is no longer met. The Stoics never viewed love as attachment. They viewed it as choice, as alignment, as something that flowed from fullness, not from emptiness. Epictetus said only the educated are free. He was not talking about academic degrees. He meant emotionally educated. Those who have done the work to know their patterns, who have faced their insecurities without expecting others to fix them. When you become emotionally educated, you stop needing love to rescue you. You offer it freely because you are no longer in emotional debt. This is the part that most people miss. When you are full, your love becomes light. It uplifts. It heals. It brings peace, not pressure. You are not holding your breath waiting to be validated. You are not demanding constant reassurance. You are not sacrificing your peace just to keep someone close. Instead, you become someone who walks in love with an open hand. Not because you are distant, but because you respect freedom, yours and theirs. Think about the kind of presence that is most unforgettable. It is not the one who clings. It is not the one who constantly needs. It is the one who brings peace into the room. The one who listens without interrupting. The one who supports without smothering. The one who knows who they are, with or without you. That energy is not easy to find, And when someone loses it, they feel it in the quiet, in the mornings when no one asks how they are, in the nights when the peace they once took for granted is gone. You become unforgettable when your love is not a lifeline, but a gift. When you can sit in your own silence without needing someone else to fill it. When you can hold space for another person's emotions without losing yourself inside them. That kind of emotional maturity is what the Stoics called self-possession. A state where your mind is not owned by circumstances or people. You are present, but not dependent. Connected, but not controlled. That is not coldness. That is the highest form of care, because it gives others the freedom to be themselves without the burden of completing you. Real love begins where desperation ends. It begins when you stop asking someone to fix what is unresolved within you and start becoming the person who no longer needs to be completed. The irony is, that is when relationships deepen. That is when people begin to trust your love. Because it no longer comes with conditions. It no longer feels like a job. It feels like home. Not a place you run to when you are lost, but a place that reflects who you have become. Ask yourself this: are you giving love from a wound or from wisdom? Are you offering your presence from fullness or fear? Are you staying because you feel empowered or because you are afraid to leave? These questions matter, because the way you love is the way you are remembered. If your love demands sacrifice without growth, if your presence requires others to hold all your pain while you refuse to face it, then your love becomes a weight. But if your love reflects your healing, your discipline, your ability to stand alone and still choose connection, then your love becomes a light. When someone walks away from that kind of energy, they do not forget it. They may try to replace it. They may even convince themselves it was not that special. But time has a way of revealing truth. And when the noise fades and the masks fall off, they remember how steady your presence felt, how safe your words were, how peaceful the space was when you were around. That is what becomes unforgettable. Not the chaos, not the drama, but the calm they cannot recreate with someone else. You become someone they regret losing, not because you begged them to stay, but because you stopped needing them to. You stood tall in your own worth. You walked away without bitterness. You held your boundaries with love, not anger. And you did not shut down. You opened up to yourself. You turned your attention inward. You filled your own cup. And when that cup was full, you offered it without expectation. That is what love becomes when you are no longer broken. It becomes something sacred. The Stoics never promised that peace would protect you from heartbreak. They promised it would protect you from losing yourself in the process. And that is the real victory. Not that you kept them, but that you kept yourself. That you rose, that you grew, that you learned to love in a way that no longer depended on being needed. That is the kind of energy people remember. Not the one who chased love, but the one who embodied it. And when you reach that point, something shifts. Quietly, but completely. You no longer chase what is not aligned. You no longer shrink to keep the peace. You no longer explain your worth in the language of your wounds. Instead, your presence becomes a reflection of your healing. Your stillness becomes strength. Your silence, clarity. And your standards rise without needing to be justified. There is a quiet power that awakens in someone the moment they realize they are no longer available for anything that steals their peace. It is not announced. It does not need a speech. But you can feel it in how they move, how they speak, how they stop participating in things that never deserved their energy in the first place. That kind of shift is not loud, but it is permanent. We have been conditioned to believe that in order to be loved, respected, or remembered, we need to be perfect. That we must erase our flaws, hide our sensitivity, and become some polished version of ourselves that is easy to digest. But that version of you is not what people miss. What they regret losing is the version of you that was real. The version that gave deeply, stood firmly, and evolved relentlessly. No one bonds over your perfection. They bond over your honesty. They remember the moments you showed up with your full heart, even when it was risky. They remember the way you stayed calm when things were falling apart, the way you respected yourself when others didn't, the way you quietly raised your standards without needing applause. Because that kind of presence cannot be faked, and once someone experiences it, it becomes impossible to replace. So many of us were raised to believe that self-worth comes from being needed, that the more we gave, the more we would be valued. But the truth is, the more we abandon ourselves for others, the more invisible we become. Real self-respect begins when you stop trying to be everything for everyone and start becoming everything you promised yourself you would be, not to impress anyone, but to finally feel at peace when you look in the mirror. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." That one sentence holds the entire philosophy. Do not explain your growth, embody it. Do not fight for recognition, become someone who no longer needs it, and in doing so you become the kind of person people remember. Not because you demanded attention, but because you stopped seeking it. When someone loses you after you have done the work to become whole, they do not just lose a person, they lose an experience, a standard, a presence that brought peace instead of chaos, a love that came without dependency, a voice that never needed to shout to be heard, and in time they will realize what they had. But by then, you will have already become the person who no longer looks back. This is the paradox. The moment you stop needing to be unforgettable is when you become exactly that. You become the one they think about when they hear your favorite song, the one they remember when someone else cannot hold a conversation, the one they compare everyone else to, and no one quite measures up. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real, because you were grounded, because you were rare. Your presence is not powerful because of what you do for people. It is powerful because of who you are when you no longer need to be anything but yourself. When you stop showing up to perform and start showing up to live. When your actions align with your values. When your silence speaks louder than explanations. And when your boundaries speak before you do. So ask yourself today, who am I becoming? Not for them, not for attention, but for me. For the life I know I was meant to live, for the peace I refuse to sacrifice, for the integrity I will never again abandon. That version of you is not only unforgettable, it is unstoppable. If this message spoke to something deep within you, know that it is not just a reminder, it is a mirror, a signal that your evolution has already begun. And if you are ready to keep building that version of yourself, you are not alone. This space is here for you. This community is for those who choose growth, not performance. Truth, not illusion. Peace, not popularity. And if you have not already, take 1 second to tap that subscribe button. Not just to follow a channel, but to anchor yourself to a standard. One that honors your strength, your softness, your discipline, your clarity. One that does not apologize for evolving. Ever. Because in the end, the world does not remember those who tried to be liked by everyone. It remembers those who had the courage to be themselves, fully, relentlessly, unapologetically. Your job is not to be remembered by everyone. Your job is to become so real, so rooted, so quietly powerful that the ones who let you go will never find that energy again. And deep down, they will know it. You were never too much. You were just never meant to be ordinary.